Hey everybody, Chris here,
Mike.
and we are so glad that you're with us. If you've been walking with us this quarter, you know we've been going through our series called The Big Risk, and we just wanted to wrap up the series tonight and bring you into a little bit of what we've been doing this quarter. So Mike, why this series? Why did we do The Big Risk? Why do we think it was important?
That's good. When Third and I have been thinking this fall about where our community is at and what we hope for you as a college student. For us, this statement drives kind of what we do, which is we want to discover what real life in Jesus looks like. It's a driving statement for our community. And for me, that means that trusting God is hard. It's hard to trust God. It's hard to put our weight down and believe the things that He says are going to actually help us experience like life to the full, when there are things around us in the world that seem easier and provide more of an instant gratification. And what I hate about any Christian circle is when they use the phrase like, just trust God. Just don't think about it, just trust God. As if trusting God is easy. Trusting God is a hard thing to do because it means oftentimes going against our instinct just to do the thing that seems easiest. And so what we've been hoping for with this series is that we would see that trusting God is a risk, and it doesn't always end up the way that we want it to go. And it certainly doesn't provide an instant result. And so what we've been walking through these last 9 weeks is what would it look like for us to take on this risk individually and as a community of trusting God and trusting that He's at work in our lives. And when we do step out in faith, that things are going to happen. He's going to do something, even if that doesn't look the way that we think it's going to look.
Yeah, I love this because to me, risk is so much at the center of relationship. And as we are about being in a relationship with Jesus, being in a relationship with each other, and being in a relationship with the world around us, we can't enter into a relationship without taking a risk. And so I've loved this series for the fact that we have gotten to engage with those hard questions of what does it look like to really step into life and engage with the risks that come with life. And in doing so, how do we know God and ourselves and the people around us more by stepping into those risks? So that's been so cool. And Mike, I've loved seeing our interns step up. That's been so fun for me is hearing the different ways that our interns have shared about risk in their life, and our students. Getting to hear our students' stories this quarter has been fantastic. That stood out to me heavy. What's been some of your favorites or highlights throughout this quarter?
I mean, I love how we've kind of taken on individual places to understand what it actually looks like to take a risk there. And it's been a risk for us. We want you to know that. I mean, things like Al speaking about privilege, week 7 of this series, was a big risk, knowing that that's a hard conversation for a lot of us to enter into. And I've loved the way, I gotta say, I've loved the way our community has responded. A lot of people that are new to this idea of privilege or how to interact with it have stepped in a way to learn. I'm proud of the way our community is stepping into things that are uncomfortable right now. That's what we believe about risk, that if you're super uncomfortable and you come into this community, the first thing we want you to do is we want you to feel comfortable, knowing that you belong as you are. But we don't want you to stay in that comfortable place for that long. If you're really comfortable here, we want you to experience what it's like to make yourself uncomfortable, so that not only would others feel comfortable, but also that you would experience Jesus, because it's so hard to experience Him when we just stay in our comfort zone.
And ultimately, this has just led us to just be really hopeful for our community. We hope that we would be a community that takes risks, that steps out in faith. Our biggest fear in this is that we would just be stagnant. And that's, I think, what is a result of being comfortable, is that we can get stagnant. And our faith can become stale, our relationships can become stale, and our life can become stale if we're not careful. And so we really have hoped that you've been able to hear, as we've talked about this idea of risk, and that your relationship with Jesus would be exciting, that you would step out into faith and see what God can do in that. And Mike hit on it really well. Like, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect and go the way you want it to, or just be everything you want it to be as you take these risks. Yeah. That's the crazy thing about risk is you're weighing your options, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. but God's going to meet you in that regardless.
Now, as we close out this series, one of the things that I'm afraid of that we've been talking about with risk so much is that some of us would step out in risk, trusting God. We would not see the immediate result we want, and then it would cause us to go back into a place of safety and comfort.
Yeah.
I think a great example, after Thurp talked about relationships last week, I had a great conversation with a student that was in an unhealthy dating relationship. They got out of that dating relationship. They were excited to talk to me about getting out of that relationship. But then 2 days later, they said, hey, this doesn't actually feel that good. I feel really lonely. Am I supposed to feel better because I've taken that risk? And you're not going to. In fact, when you make the smart, wise choice in life, you're oftentimes going to feel the immediate impact of the loss. When we get out of something that's bad for us, like a relationship, we will feel the loss of that, and most likely we'll feel that pretty heavy before we get to a place of feeling more fullness in the good that is going to come from a decision like that.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think that is the big pieces when we think about risk. Alan used his word really well. He said it's dicey, and risks can be dicey. But when we're taking them out, and ultimately what we're looking for sometimes is peace. And to get to that peace, sometimes you got to tear down some walls, and that can create chaos in our lives. So sometimes we take a risk, some walls get torn down, and that does not feel good. But that's not the point of a relationship with Jesus, is to feel good. It's to be healthy and to move forward and become more like Jesus, become more into the people we were created to be. So I think that's a really good word.
Yeah. So we've seen a lot of people that have shared with us different risks they're taking. Mm-hmm. We also know that this leads us to a place where, for some of us, we're wanting to step into new things and trust God in new ways, but we're still holding on to something that feels more comfortable and safe right now. I want you to take a look at this photo. Let's go there. This one gives a great example. I was driving home the other day, and I saw this tree. Okay, it's near my house, and it's March, and this tree has a bunch of dead leaves on the tree. And with all the other trees around it have no leaves because they lost their leaves November, December, and all these other trees look bare. And from a distance, if you see this tree, it looks like the only one that is producing fruit and actually has leaves. But the funny thing is, all these leaves on it are dead. And it got me thinking a lot about this thing in our life where some of us are ready for this season of shedding some of these dead things in our life. But we're holding on to the dead things, and what that's doing is it's not allowing the opportunity for new growth. Where in the next few weeks, we're going to see some of these bare trees that are going to bud. They're going to bud new life for this coming season because they were okay with shedding the death of their previous leaves. And I think a lot about what it looks like for us to be okay with shedding some of the dead things in our life, even before we see the new life that God wants to bring to us.
And so that's kind of led to some of the reflections that we've had as we've gone through this quarter. And the big questions we've been getting from our community is, how do we step out into fear? And then what do we do once we've taken a risk? What's our response to the risks that we've taken? And we don't want you to just hear from us. We want you to hear from our staff. So we've kind of opened these questions up to our staff. And you get a chance right now to hear from them as they share what it's looked like for them to step through fear, and then how they respond to the risks that they've taken.
I think the biggest thing that scares me about risk is there's some type of unknown, there's a piece of information that I'm missing, and I don't really see the other side of the picture right away. And so what scares me about risk is I have to step out without knowing everything, trusting that what I do know is going to be enough to step into the decision and see the other side when I get there.
I'm the type of person where when something risky is happening, it's really easy for me to spiral and think of all of the possibilities that could go wrong. I don't really look for any truth in that, and I think the fear kind of festers and feeds into all these other fears that kind of combine into one.
The way that I've stepped through fear is remembering the different times in my life that I've just given up to God and said, I can't do this without you, you need to show up. And the amount of times He has.
walk through seasons or moments of fear, I think a lot of Daniel 3 and the story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the furnace, and how they literally said to King Nebuchadnezzar, like, even if not, like, our God is still good. Whenever I'm in seasons where I am feeling fearful about a decision I need to make, I just go, God, you're with me in this, and even if not, even if it doesn't work out the way that I want it to, you're gonna use it for your good.
It's been really sweet opportunities for me, honestly, to turn to Jesus, and I think he always wants me to, and I always am in this headspace of, no, I'm good, I can do this on my own. But when fear comes around, I'm so dependent on who Jesus is. And I turn to worship music. I have a song in over my head by Bethel that I will put on repeat, and I'll just sit there and be soaking in who Jesus has called me to be, and know that he's with me when I go into seasons of fear and spaces of fear. And that's honestly the only thing that can get me in the right headspace when I am doing something that scares me.
And honestly, just having voices that hype me up in this idea of taking a risk and just who God is in the midst of that, and that his character is consistent regardless of the outcome. And so that's part of how I step into a risk, is like that kind of messy process, and there's not an ABC to it, but it is prayer and people and support that I know will be there through the outcome.
It takes me from like sitting wondering to making things happen. Without fear, I wouldn't take risks. Without fear, I wouldn't make moves. Because where fear is, there's also opportunity.
To me, I think that fear stems from a place of not knowing. The fear of feeling like you should know something, and not knowing it creates fear. I see that in my own life. I think about when I take risks, like that fear is a natural feeling that I experience when I take risks, because I can't control the outcome and I don't know what's going to happen.
I think a lot of times when I see fear in other people, it's because they show it externally, but I think I've realized a lot of the way that I interact with fear is internally. And so it might not be seen on the outside, but just because I don't necessarily express that on the outside doesn't mean that I don't wrestle with fear inside.
I love that question because it's so different for everyone. To be honest, if I think about it, this is something I need to work on. I think celebrating and lamenting are both really good responses to taking risk, and they're both things that I am being more intentional about these days in my life and want to work on for the rest of my life. Yep.
I breathe. I breathe. Because sometimes I'm holding my breath because I'm really scared. And so I remember to breathe again. Or sometimes it's a like it went the way I wanted, and I can exhale in like peace of like, yes. Or sometimes it's a I didn't go the way I wanted, now what, God?
Celebrate risk. I probably just take a nap. It's a lot of energy.
I like to celebrate with people. Sometimes, if you don't have anyone to celebrate with, it's just not, it doesn't feel like it was such a big deal. So I love to pull people into the risk with me, at least say like, hey, I'm about to take this risk. Will you pray for me? Will you be thinking about me, so that when it does happen, whether it goes well or not, those people are there. I think that's really important.
I just took a risk yesterday, and so the most practical thing was I took the risk, and I was like, wow, I did it. And then I thought to myself, you really did that, good job. And then I got in my car, and I was talking to Jesus, and I was like, man, I did it. That's so cool. Thanks, God, we did it together. I got home, and I got to talk to my roommates about it, and it was really exciting just to be able to celebrate with people who know me, know my heart, are with me, for me, and I think anytime we take a risk, it's so important to make that time to celebrate. So,
By the river.
I know that in myself there can be a spiral of kind of negative self-talk, and that's just the humanness in me, and that cycle is pretty negative, and it space for me to process alone, and then also with people and with trusted people to be reminded again about the character of God and the reality that I am not my mistakes, and there's so much more to God, and He's bigger than that, and He will be with me regardless of the outcome.
We want to say thank you for joining us and checking out some of this content we had for you. And we want to thank our staff for really engaging with what it looks like for them to step through fear and step through risk. Something we know is we all face fear. There's a reason that it's one of the most given commands in the Bible is to not be afraid. It's because we deal with fear all the time. We have to learn how to engage it and step through it and take the risk to do that.
And so tonight closes down our 10-week winter series, but we encourage you that this does not end tonight. And as we go into spring break, we encourage you to figure out what it would look like for you and for this community to step into and trust God in some new ways of what He might be leading us into.
Yeah. So we want to leave you with this. What does it look like for you to step through fear? And how do you follow up with the risk that you take? How do you celebrate well, and how do you lament well? Have a good night.
Good night, y'all.